All right, finishing the Sicha that we're learning about Yitzchak. Focusing on the first pasuk of Parshas Toldos, Toldos Yitzchak ben Avram, Avram Haler Yitzchak. These are the generations of Yitzchak, the son of Avram. Avram begot Yitzchak. Why is it double language? Once you told us Yitzchak, the son of Avram, yes. Why do you have to tell us Avram begot Yitzchak? So all the commentaries are like, oh, because Yitzchak's the true descendant of Avram. Also, because it was so long, they had a son with Sarah, so that no one should doubt the lineage. They looked exactly alike. So in their features, they were exactly the same. Not just that, they were exactly the same in their character, as in the divine service was exactly the same. Question about that: Avram represents love and kindness, and Yitzchak represents awe and fear. Those are their pathways. So how can you say they're exactly alike? They actually seem to represent two totally different characteristics. And when you look at the chart of the spheres, the 10 soul powers, those 10 attributes that are how God interacts with the world, love and fear are on two opposite sides. One's the right side, one's the left side. Also, if we look further, Yitzchak's name and Yitzchak himself seems to be described often in terms of love and kindness, not awe and fear. There's like a little bit of a mush going on here. Number one, he was born on Pesach, which is Avram's holiday. His name itself is derived from laughter, this outward expression of joy, which is love and kindness side. He's described with the word of great. He became very great, which is expansiveness. And I'll multiply your seed and I'll give you Yitzchak. Also expansiveness, which is love and kindness. Because the general idea of love and kindness, that's the side of water. Water just flows. It just goes. It does not discriminate. It just goes, which is why so much water can be a flood. Versus fire is, yes, fire can spread. It's usually something that burns upward, breaks things down. That's the love and fear side. Now, with all that, we had the binding of Isaac, Kedis Yitzchak, and Avram did that. He tapped into fear. That's not a love thing. That's a fear thing. Everybody's got both parts to them, and it just depends on what dominates, what's predominantly shown. But the time is right, you got to tap into the other thing. Yes, that is correct, but that's not fully what we're saying. The point that's being made here is that it's not just that Yitzchak also had kindness in him, but that kindness and love were fundamental aspects to his character, fundamental aspects to his makeup. Of course, we're going to get to awe and fear can lead someone to a much higher level of love and kindness. What attribute is that manifest through is gvur, which is strength, right? Like Gibor. And we say, when Alexander the Great asked the sages who was a strong person, they say someone who could control himself. Because what is real might is restraint. That there's going to be a massive outpouring of potential being able to hold that back. That's what true strength is. Then we got to the thing that love engenders closeness. When someone loves someone else, they desire to draw close to them. But what's important about that relationship is that the identity of the people involved is vital to that love, to that relationship. Great love can be achieved, but the identities of the people involved are very important to that. Versus yira, awe, is all about making your own identity smaller. We call that bittul, which is nullification of the self, making my own self smaller. So removing my identity from this equation. How does that all play out? So for example, you have the father and the son, parent to child, specifically because one is parent and one is child. That's why there's this great love between them. And not just that, but the more love that the parent shows the child, the more the child is rooted and confident in their identity. Yes, there's a great love there, but the identities are important to what that love is. Versus the servant to the master, we don't care who the servant is. You're here to serve master, and your identity is irrelevant to this. So there are times also in divine service, because sometimes we see God as our father, and especially at those times, you think about the fact that God is our father, you think about that more. That's going to awaken love and engender I want to draw closer to God now, as he is my father, and I love him so much. Or there are times that we think of God in the master-servant relationship, and that's going to inspire awe and bittul, nullification of self. God is so muchness, I am so nothing before all the muchness. Also leads to humility. But the important thing is that this is not to make us all like a bunch of doormats that everybody walks all over. The whole point is that I remove my identity so that the other side of the equation can fill the space. Remember how to get to 9. 2 plus 7 or 5 plus 4, etc. But you also get to 9 by 9 plus 0. Me being 0 means that I left the rest of the equation as God being 9. Whatever that number is going to be. Well, 9 is infinite. So one is a precursor for the other. If it's just about the love between parent-child or whatever it is, it's two finite beings achieving great love, because parent to child, that's not even a love that can really be explained. But as great as it is, it's still a limited finite love because it's two finite beings. Massive greatness, but still finite. Versus bittul, this removal of the self, I'm now open up to infinity because I'm taking away the finite factor. Because I'm taking away my own identity, I'm limiting and removing the finite factor. And what's going to fill the rest of the space is infinite. That's where the rest of the equation goes in. So that's where I can achieve something even greater. Going to the original thing, that leads me to a higher level of closeness, because closeness between two people is going to be very closeness, but it's finite. Here, we're talking about something that's infinite. God can bestow any sort of anything, and then anything can happen. Speaking more about the servant putting aside his identity, when he does that, he exists as like a medium of the king and the king's power. That's why we have the whole thing of melech, that the servant of the king is like a king. When a servant is totally given over to the king, wherever he's going to go, he's going to represent the king. So you give the servant the kind of respect and treatment that you would give to the king himself, because he is there as if he embodies the king. That got us to that last paragraph of that midah, etc., etc. My soul should be like dust to all, but my heart's your Torah. How does that make sense? You want to be like dust, or you want to talk about my heart? That's a very identity-driven statement. One is the precursor to the other, because Torah is just so, we can't even fathom it. And even just saying you can't fathom it is just a ridiculous statement. Ergo, therefore, if you're going to approach Torah study, you're just inserting yourself into this Torah study, and you're only going to get so far. Versus if you first removal of identity, make myself smaller, humility, and now I could go study Torah, now my heart can truly be open to Torah study. Because what is going to come to me now, where that openness comes from, is God himself. Any sort of revelations or understanding cannot come to me, because it's not about me approaching it, it's about opening myself up to whatever God is going to bestow upon me. Reaching this kind of level, we get to the level of Simcha parts Gender, that joy breaks through all barriers. Joy specifically, a true, healthy, high level of joy overrides the limitations of nature, because that comes from an absolute deep trust and knowing of God being in control of the world and everything being well within the world. And that kind of level that where you could override things comes specifically through Yitzchak's service, as in the awe and the fear that first starts off with becoming bittul, removal identity. So now that we're open to infinite, that's what allows us now to transcend limitations, to override. Punchline of this, Yitzchak's divine service through awe was a means of drawing closer to Hashem, but without the limitations and finite capacity of created beings. So we do draw closer, but because we've removed ourselves from it, it's without the finite limitations that we usually be there when it's just about people. Now, yes, Yitzchak is all about awe and bittul, nullification of the self, removal of identity. That reaches an incredibly high level. But Avram, chesed, and love and kindness could get us there also. Not at the same level, but still at extremely high level. Avram says, I am dust and ashes. We see further proof of this, letter that we have from the Alter Rebbe, Katonti b'kol chasadim, I've been made small from all the kindnesses. This is Yaakov speaking to God before he's going to see Esav. Oh, the last 20 years you've been so good to me. I don't have any merits left. That's kind of how Rashi interprets it. But we look at the word katonti, it doesn't just mean, oh, all my merits have been made small. It means I have been made small. That's what the Alter Rebbe translates it as. Kindness can make someone feel small also, as in the removal of identity idea. And especially because everything is like nothing before God. When God does kindness for us, he's drawing us in closer to him. The closer we get to him, the less of an independent self we can be. So yes, kindness can also lead to this level of what we call bittul, nullification of the self, removal of the self. Kindness could get us there also. But by the way, it's what gets us there in a higher level. And just even a general thing, if someone does something for you, if you sit for a while in that gratitude, the more grateful you are to them, the smaller you are. There's a reason why gratitude and humility are very closely tied to each other. I went through a bunch of different things showing about how this level that Yitzchak reached was drawn down into his physical life as well. So it's not just a matter of, oh, he's in some esoteric place, he drew it down into his physical world, and we saw it in the soul and the body, day-to-day life, we saw these levels. That he was designated as a sacrifice, he was a holy sacrifice. You can't go down to Egypt. Avram went down to Egypt for famine, Yaakov went down to Egypt for famine. When there was a famine in Yitzchak's time, God's like, you can't go down to Egypt, you're too holy. The other thing that we saw is that even though it was a year of famine and he was in this land, a hard year, etc., he still reaped 100-fold. To the point, they said, we'd rather the manure of Yitzchak's mules than the gold and silver of Amelech the king. Even to that point, greatness that he achieved. This, he drew down these blessings, these high-level blessings into the physical world. Then we saw the whole thing also with the wells. And the commentaries are, why are we going through verses and verses discussing wells that it's not that new, because Avram dug them. Avram dug these 3 wells, they got filled back up again, so you just undug them. Just say, Yitzchak undug his father's wells. That's all. Instead, it goes through a bunch of verses and it tells the whole story. So that's why you had the commentary, was Ramban, who said this is actually an indication, a signal of the future. Putting it in here to show Yitzchak reached this level that he gave this signal to the future. That the first well was like the first base of Mikdash. Everybody fought over it and it was destroyed. The second well was like the second base of Mikdash. They fought over it and destroyed. The third well is the third base of Mikdash. There's going to be peace. Nobody fought over it and it was left alone. Third base of Mikdash, there'll be peace. Everyone's going to gather together to learn about God. Then we went to this whole thing with the Gemara about the scapegoat and about even with if your sins are going to be red like scarlet, God is going to forgive us and make it white like snow. Amen. The level of forgiveness God will offer us. Then it talks about the wording of the prophet about go and reason. God will say. So why is it future tense? Why I say go and reason, should come and reason, God said. So it's, there will come a time. There will come a time the Jewish people, they can do something they shouldn't have done. Who are you going to? Go to the patriarchs. And the Jews are going to say, we're supposed to go to the patriarchs. They list each of the patriarchs. Avram, you said we're going to be strangers and we're going to be slaves and he didn't stand up for us. It's like this, Yaakov this. Why do I say go? So God's like, oh good. Okay, you're relying on me, I'll forgive you. Talk about another time. Surely there will come a time where they're going to have to go to the forefathers again. God's going to go to Avram and be like, your children have sinned against me. And Avram's punish them. And Yaakov's going to be like, they did wrong, you got to punish them. Then they're going to go to Yitzchak, and that's the origins of Jewish accounting. They go to Yitzchak and Yitzchak's, first of all, what do you mean my children? Your children also. Then he starts doing the whole math thing. Like you say they sinned against you, like how much could they really sin? A person lives about 70 years. You can't be punished till you're 20, so it's really 50 years. And then half that time a person's sleeping. The person has to eat and go to the bathroom and all that kind of stuff. So he basically gets it all the way down to 12 and a half years and it's like, God, we'll split split it. You take 6 1/4, 6 1/4. Big deal. Or if not, I'll take the rest of it. But remember that I sacrificed myself for you. And God's good point. I see what you're saying here. So that's what we say, Yitzchak, you're our father. We're going to use that language. Then we speak about how Yitzchak drew down very lofty levels of blessings. The blessings that he gave to his son. Well, he gave it to Yaakov because he took the blessings from Esau. We spoke about the idea also about how the patriarchs, they are the chariot. And not just that they were divine chariot for the divine will. The divine chariot for they were also chariots for these attributes that they represented. Avram is the chariot for the divine will. God says and Avram does. But also Avram is the divine chariot to manifest this attribute of kindness, chesed. And Yitzchak is the chariot for the attribute of gevura. And then we got to the thing that gevura, which might is about restraint, we usually think about it in terms of judgment and contraction. Go all the way back to the first Sicha we ever did, the name of Elokim, that we say is nature, we said it's the name of judgment. Also contraction, which is how nature comes about, because it's also the name for nature. The original contraction and contract the light. All the 10 thing, remember all the 10 thing that goes on? So contraction, we think that is, first of all, negative, because the divine light is getting contracted, and also judgment. Thou shalt not have. That's what we think of it. It said, no, that's not what it is. It's not specifically something negative. It's actually, gevura is a mighty force. And then that's how we had the whole thing about speaking about how it's like the mighty rains. Then we got to the whole story of Choni Magod, when they came to him and said, Choni, daven for us, we need rain. So Choni drew the circle. It's like, I will not leave until there's rain. So there was a drizzle. They're like, Choni, not enough. I will not leave until there's rain. And then it starts flooding. It's too much, Choni, too much. God, they can't handle it. It's too much. You gotta give them what they can handle. Point is, with all that, is to show that the rain that's coming down is a mighty force. This is what we ended up with last time, that what is the difference between chesed and gevura? Chesed is about bestowing kindness upon someone else, but it's according to the capacity of the receiver, as in according to the capacity of the makabel. So I'm going to give you kindness, I got to tailor the kindness I'm giving according to you, so like according to what you can handle. Gevura is about bestowing an overwhelming, powerful, beneficent kindness on another according to the bestower, as in gevura would be about how much can I actually give. So we could see how there might be a conflict here, because the receiver can't always receive what the giver can give. Chesed, kindness, is about the receiver. Gevura is about the giver. So when the recipient can't handle such abundance of goodness, gevura, etc., leads to tzimtzum. Gevura then leads to contraction. So contraction is not about you don't get this. Contraction is about, if I give this to you, according to how I can give it, you won't be able to handle it. Thereby, I must contract, I gotta vacuum pack the kindness so that you could actually handle it. The divine attribute of gevura and din, might and judgment, that are tied together, are not for their own sake. Rather, their entire objective is to impart kindness. The whole reason why we have contraction, we have might, the restraint of something, is specifically for kindness. So the same way that awe and fear leads to a higher level of love and closeness, because removal of the self now could lead to a higher level. The same idea is here, is that might and judgment, the fact that I'm contracting the kindness, withholding per se, etc., is specifically for the ultimate purpose of imparting kindness. Not just to be like, I shall be judging all thee. The punishments in the Torah are not ends unto themselves, but to cleanse and purify the transgressor until he can be granted atonement. Which is how we have the entire Torah, even with its punishments, is called Torah's chesed. The Torah does list punishment, or we can say consequences for actions. God says, you do this, there's a price to pay for certain actions. Whatever it's going to be. A lot of times, that's why you have the whole list of sacrifices that have to be brought and what they have to be brought for, etc. Certain times it's lashes, or someone stole, you have to pay back, you can't pay it back, you got to sell yourself as a servant basically until you could pay it back. All these different things. So you can say, oh, how cruel the Torah that there's all these punishments. The whole point of the punishment is not because God's some vengeful God who wants you to just be blasting everybody with his lightning. That's not what it's about. The whole point of the punishment is that when you will be cleansed, you can now become a recipient for greater kindnesses. Going back to the whole thing of getting a cup of water for Niagara Falls, but if you're going to stick out a dirty cup to me, I'm not pouring water into your dirty cup. Go clean that cup. No, I don't want to clean the cup. Well, imagine what happens if you pour the water into the dirty cup. That's gross. So clean the cup, which is basically the punishment, the purification, and now I can pour water into it. Which is how the entire Torah, when we refer to Torah, even with all that it contains and everything that's going on there, and people are smiting and smoting and smarted, it's still called Torah's chesed. Do you recognize this? Eshes Chayil, woman of valor. Pia pascha b'chachma v'saras chesed alishana. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and instruction of kindness is on her tongue. Instruction of kindness was really Torah of kindness. Torah's chesed, that's what we're referencing, that we say the whole Torah, even with everything it contains, is called Torah's chesed, the Torah of kindness. Now, who recognizes these two hands? I took it right out of the Mechamocha Mimer. We have the two sides, chesed and gevura. Remember the attributes, they also represent, remember we said also that the 10 attributes will align with the human body. So the right arm is chesed and the left arm is gevura. The two hands are vectors through which divine energy is expressed. This is the way God can relate to the world, either through kindness or through severity or might. So either through chesed or through gevura, God can interact with the world through this, plus all the other attributes. These are two apparent attributes. However, both the left and the right vectors reflect the right vector characterized by chesed. This is from the Zohar. I actually don't have the whole text for it. Zohar that explains that even the left side is ultimately rooted in the right side. When we're talking about how we think that judgment and severity and might and these things are left side, sometimes are kind of these negative attributes, everything is ultimately rooted in kindness. Even gevura, it's a way of giving kindness. How is it a way of giving kindness? Because remember, if we go back to the whole thing, that it's all about the giver can bestow a massive amount of kindness, the might, such great might there, but the giver has to withhold it at times because the recipient can't handle it. So, wrapping up the Sicha, In man's divine service, the attributes of love and fear are revoked by corresponding attributes of chesed and gevura. So love and fear manifest through chesed and gevura. Chesed, kindness, is a flow of divine beneficence or divine kindness according to the created being's capacity to receive. Such expression evokes a feeling of love and thereby desire to draw close, as we've kind of been saying. So wrapping this up, chesed in our day-to-day life, this is God is giving us a lot of kindness according to our capacity to receive the kindness. So the kindnesses that we get, all the goodness, the revealed goodness that we see, it's according to what we can actually handle. When we think about this is an expression, it's going to evoke a feeling of love and thereby desire to draw closer to God. Oh God, thanks so much for the kindnesses. I feel close to you now. What do I do for you? And if you remember this, we saw this a lot in Tanya. We saw it in other places also. As water mirrors the face of the face, so does the heart of man to man. King Solomon said this, and he wasn't just trying to give us a factoid here. He was telling us the nature of how we work. That specifically when someone shows somebody a lot of kindness, you reciprocate that feeling. Feeling a lot of love coming from someone, feeling all the love, my heart is open toward that. My heart opens now to the other person. So when we sense and when we recognize God's great kindness to us, that's going to evoke the feeling of love, feeling love back toward him. And I want to draw close to you. Gevura is an overwhelming divine energy beyond the creation's capacity to receive. There's such a massive force of kindness coming down, we can't even necessarily take it in. So this evokes a feeling of yira, awe, and bittul, which is kind of what you get if you stand at the rim of the Grand Canyon or something, you're just like, whoa. It's just massiveness. It's that moment where it's just the vastness of something makes you feel so small. Since it transcends natural limits, man recognizes essential humility and seeks to surpass it by identifying with Hashem's light, thereby giving him the ability to receive this influence. Goes back to, as thus all enables open heart to Torah. This feeling of massiveness makes us feel so small, and through that, we can transcend our own limitations and draw closer to God. There's actually an idea. It's in chapter 26 of Tanya. There's a general idea that sometimes there are blessings that come down to this world that are too big for this world to handle. So when it comes down to this world, it gets distorted almost because the world can't handle it. So it ends up becoming distorted, and when it gets to us, it doesn't look like a blessing anymore. Something that happens to us doesn't seem like a blessing anymore, even though it actually comes from a much higher source than blessings that are overtly revealed. Blessings that are revealed, often it means that it can be handled by the world. That's why we can actually see it so obviously. There's no interruption in that direct channeling. But sometimes if something is coming from higher than it, because it's coming from so high up, coming down to this world, we're not a vessel for that level of kindness. So it doesn't always look like a blessing to us. So sometimes you could see it once things play out for a while. You could see how that thing which I thought was so negative ended up being an actual positive. So sometimes I think the worst thing is the biggest blessing. There are things like that. There's also other levels for it. Anyways, going back to this. This brings us all to the awe of Yitzchak and the love of Avraham are not opposites. For the intent of the awe and bittul, the nullification of the self, is to facilitate an overwhelming expression of Hashem's kindness, enabling a person to draw close with heightened intensity. They're not opposites because one is supposed to lead to a much greater level than the other. We're throwing in a bunch of things now. More examples of Yitzchak being at a particular kind of level. The time of Mincha, you know the three prayers, Shachris, Mincha, and Ma'ariv. Each one of the prayers is associated with one of the forefathers. Shachris, Avram instituted that, Yitzchak instituted Mincha, and Yaakov instituted Ma'ariv. And there's different verses about why they associate like that. Mincha is in the middle of the day. Shachris is in the morning, you're getting your day started okay. Ma'ariv is at the end of the day, your day is wrapping up. Mincha is smack in the middle of the day. And especially if it's a winter, you gotta run to get Mincha in. The time of Mincha is identified with Yitzchak, who instituted the Mincha service, and it's a time associated with the attribute of Gevura. On Shabbos, Mincha is referred to as Ravad Derav in the Will of Wheels, which is the apex of Chesed. Even greater than the Chesed associated with Avram, who instituted the morning prayer. This is also sort of connected to Zohar, but the general idea is that Mincha is a very special time. The prayer of Mincha, which is the afternoon service, it has a very special weight to it, specifically because you had to stop your day to do Mincha. So, I mean, they also correspond to sacrifice, etc., but there's something about Mincha that holds a very special to it because you have to stop your day for it. And here it's saying that it is associated with the apex of Chesed. That's according to the Zohar. Last couple of things. Yitzchak is called the cherished friend. The love for God associated with Yitzchak is love like flames of fire. Intensely passionate love that transcends limitations. In contrast, the love for God associated with Avram is love like water. A love which, like water, is calming. That's why people like to go and sit by the beach for calmness, and by the lake, calmness. So it's a calming love versus a burning, fiery love. This love is termed Avos Olam, eternal love. However, Olam also means world. In that context, the phrase would indicate a love for God that comes from meditating upon the more limited level of godliness that is enclosed in the world. Remember we learned about the different levels of love in Tanya? So Avat Olam is when you look around at the world, wow, thank you God for all this, that awakens love, that creates love within us. So here, don't forget though, if you said world, you're talking about a created being. Accordingly, this love is limited and conforms to the structure of this world. Avat Olam, a love that's awakened by the world, is a love that has to conform to the structure of the world. Almost last thing, here's where we have the thing of cherished friend. This is what's said at a bris. Tanar Banan, the sages taught in a Tosefta that one who circumcises a child recites, was made as holy through his command, commandments and command us concerning circumcision. The father of the circumcised child recites, who has made us holy through his commandments and commanded us to bring him into the covenant of Avram our father. Those standing there recite, just as he has entered into the covenant, so may enter the term marriage and good deeds. You're supposed to say that by the circumcision. The one who recites the additional blessing says, who made the beloved one holy from the womb, marked the decree in his flesh, and gave his descendants the seal and the sign of the holy covenant. Therefore, as a reward for this, the living God, our portion, commanded to deliver the beloved of our flesh from destruction for the sake of his covenant that he set in our flesh. But are you, Lord, who establishes the covenant. In the Hebrew, in that first line, it's like the fifth word. Who made the beloved one holy from the womb. Yedid, beloved, it means cherished, as we said over there. He's talking about the cherished friend. Rashi says on that, Yitzchak Did al Shem Asher Afta. When you go to the whole story of the binding of Isaac, God speaks to Abraham. He says, take your son, your favorite son, Yitzchak, whom you love. So it's very specific wording here, specifically identify Yitzchak as being a cherished one and a loved one. All this to say is through the divine service of Yitzchak, Yitzchak is called the cherished one and the loved one. Through imitating, through mimicking this kind of service, we can draw closer to God to a much higher level than just love. And then it ends off with blessings, so we shall end off with blessings. That root of fear of Yitzchak elicits overwhelming abundance from above, transcending all limits. Rav to the base of Chasadav, and much good to the house of Israel according to his many kind acts. From high above, we're drawing down massive blessings. These blessings lead to abundant goodness in material and spiritual matters. Moreover, there should be a fusion bringing about overt and apparent goodness that actually manifests on the physical plane. Amen. So may it be that the blessings should manifest on the physical plane. And now, look. This is a letter from the Rebbe, biography I wrote about my grandfather, who we presented it to the family. My cousin who I worked on with this brought out this letter. I found this letter among the pages. I don't know if anybody knew it existed, but here it is. When we did this, I'll tell you why this letter. So this is a letter from the Rebbe, and it was written to my grandfather's shul in 1960. My grandfather, among all the many things that he did, he was also the rabbi of one of the biggest shul in East Flatbush. High holiday time, the numbers were into the thousands. The place was packed. So all the Jews lived there. He was the rabbi of this very big shul, and in 1960 they were celebrating 13 years of him being the rabbi at that shul. And so the Rebbe wrote a letter for the big dinner, the bar mitzvah dinner that they had. It starts off with blessings to everybody on this wonderful occasion, and everybody who's here, etc. And then it goes into teaching, as a letter from the Rebbe will do. This week that you're having the dinner is the week of Parshas Toldos. What is something Parshas Toldos that we see? Parshas Toldos starts off with Yitzchak ben Avram, Avram Holedis Yitzchak. Yitzchak the son of Avram, Avram begot Yitzchak. So what does the Rebbe say with this? The Rebbe says specifically why is he using this kind of language? Is because Torah, which is a language of teaching, Torah comes from the lesson of Harav, giving a teaching. What is the Torah teaching us with this? It underscores the connection between parents and children. Because very often children will brag about who their parents are. You know who my father is? So Yitzchak ben Avram is like the child brags about who their parents are. You know where I come from? You know who my people are? But we have the double language that Avram Holedis Yitzchak, that Avram begot Yitzchak, because it also should be that the parents should want to brag about their children. To say, it's not just that the children should say, oh, do you know who my parents are? The parents should want to say, these are my children. Have real nachas like that to say that. And it goes into the whole thing about that should be the merit of the fathers and there should be the merit of the children both. And this is a good thing for a shul. We have the different generations are gathered in the shul, etc. And it ends off with blessings and that kind of idea that it should be a shul of light, etc., etc. And then ends off brachos, brachos, and the Rebbe's signature. Very powerful letter. And with that, we have done the Sicha.